Hello everyone, my name is Samuel Kim. I'm a PhD candidate at Queen's University. It is an honor for me to be here presenting to you at the World Anti-Bullying Forum. I'll be speaking about our study that examines bullying, mental health, and the moderating role of supportive adult relationships, involving a cross-national analysis of youth across 45 countries. In-person bullying perpetration and victimization, as well as cyberbullying perpetration and victimization, are all associated with mental health concerns among youth. There is a need to understand protective factors that may mitigate such negative mental health effects of bullying involvement. And in particular, it is important to examine culturally universal protective factors that could inform international bullying prevention and mental health promotion. Supportive adults, such as teachers and parents, may protect youth against mental health problems across cultural contexts. Possibly, there also may be cumulative effects of having supportive adults in multiple settings that are relevant for youth development, such as the home and school. However, previous research has mainly focused on understanding the protective effects of teachers and parents separately. To address such limitations in the literature, our study first aimed to describe cross-national patterns of in-person bullying and cyberbullying perpetration and victimization. Second, we aimed to describe cross-national patterns in the associations between in-person and cyberbullying involvement and mental health problems. In particular, we focused on two indicators of mental health problems: one, psychological symptoms, and two, life satisfaction. And finally, we aim to examine the moderating role of supportive relationships with an adult, such as a parent or a teacher, in the associations between bullying involvement and mental health problems. This study used cross-sectional data from the 2017-2018 Health Behavior in School-Aged Children study. The HBSC is a cross-national, school-based survey conducted every 4 years involving countries in Europe, North America, and the Middle East. National surveys were conducted following a standard protocol, with youth participants nested within schools, selected to be nationally representative of youth aged 11, 13, and 15. Anonymous self-report questionnaires were administered in classrooms by a teacher or a trained researcher. Data from 45 countries participating in this cycle of the HBSC were included in the present analysis. In total, 230,757 students from 45 countries and regions were included in the analysis. The median sample size within participating countries was 4,520. There was a roughly equal number of boys and girls and students in each of the three age groups. The smallest sample was drawn from Greenland and the largest from Wales. We calculated 4 indicators of bullying involvement: 1, in-person bullying perpetration; 2, in-person bullying victimization; 3, cyberbullying perpetration; and lastly, cyberbullying victimization, by using a modified version of the Olweus bullying scale. Responses to items assessing the frequency of each form of bullying involvement were dichotomized to categorize individuals within each indicator of bullying involvement. Life satisfaction was measured using youth's self-report on a Cantrell ladder ranging from 0, worst possible life, to 10, best possible life, with a score of 5 or lower considered to be low life satisfaction. Psychological symptoms were measured with a 4-item scale, assessing the frequency of experiencing 4 mood symptoms, such as feeling low, feeling irritable, feeling nervous, and difficulty sleeping, over the last 6 months. An average rating of about every week on this scale indicated high levels of psychological symptoms. Finally, the presence of supportive adults were assessed using single items for both parent and teacher. A relationship with a supportive parent was assessed using an item from the multidimensional scale of perceived social support, ranging from 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. A score of 5 or greater on this item was considered as a presence of a supportive parent in the child's life. Students were deemed to have a supportive teacher if they agreed with the question, "I feel that my teachers care about me as a person." Parent and teacher support were combined into a summary indicator of relationships with supportive adults with 3 separate levels: 1. No supportive adults. 2. Either a parent or a teacher. And 3. Both parent and teacher. Looking at the descriptive results of our study, we found that boys in our sample were more likely to perpetrate in-person as well as cyberbullying than girls. Levels of in-person and cyber victimization were both similar for boys and girls. This graph demonstrates a median proportion of youth in each of the indicators of bullying involvement across 45 countries. We examined the prevalence of mental health concerns among boys and girls in 45 countries. The prevalence of both high psychological symptoms as well as low life satisfaction were consistently worse among girls compared to boys. While we don't show this in the graph, we found that the prevalence of mental health problems tended to increase with age. We also examined how much youth report having a supportive adult in their lives across the 45 countries. And what we found was that the vast majority of adolescents reported having at least one or more supportive relationships with parents and teachers. Very few youth reported having no supportive adults in their lives. And while this is not depicted in the graph, the percentages of youth reporting no supportive adults in their lives increased with age in both girls and boys. We examined the proportion of youth in our sample reporting mental health concerns as a function of the number of supportive adults in their lives. We found that there was a statistically significant linear decrease in the proportion of youth reporting mental health concerns as the number of supportive adults in their lives increased from none to having both a supportive parent and teacher. This pattern was consistently observed for boys and girls in all age groups. This finding suggests that having caring and supportive adults in homes and schools is an important factor in promoting positive mental health among youth in general. We then conducted a multivariate Poisson regression analysis to examine the relative risk of mental health problems across different forms of bullying involvement in each country. Models were all stratified by gender and age group and controlled for family affluence. Clustering by school was adjusted for using generalized estimating equations, and all analyses were weighted. To evaluate the consistency of effects across the 45 countries and regions, for each model, we reported the number of countries where the relative risk was equal to 1, which indicates no association between bullying involvement and mental health outcome, and the relative risk being greater than 1, which indicates an increased risk of mental health problems due to bullying involvement, and in the cases where relative risk is less than 1, which indicates a decreased risk. What we found was that across all 4 indicators of bullying involvement, bullying involvement was consistently associated with increased risks of mental health problems across the 45 countries. Although we found that non-significant effects, and this would be if the confidence interval intersects or crosses over a relative risk of 1, they were not uncommon. So this forest plot actually visually represents one of our models for assessing the relative risk of low life satisfaction among 15-year-old girls who experienced cyberbullying victimization across 45 countries. We observed that for most countries, the relative risk was greater than 1, indicating an increased risk of low life satisfaction among cyber-victimized girls. And we found that this pattern of results was consistent across all 4 indicators of bullying involvement. Next, we conducted a pooled analysis to examine how the associations between bullying involvement and mental health concerns is moderated by the presence of supportive adults. What we found was that the risks for high psychological symptoms associated with bullying involvement were greatest for students reporting multiple supportive adults compared to 1 or no supportive adults at all. This trend was observed consistently across all 4 indicators of bullying involvement, including cyber perpetration and cyber victimization. Similarly, we found that risks for low life satisfaction associated with bullying involvement were greatest for students reporting multiple supportive adults compared to one or none of supportive adults. This trend was observed consistently, once again, across all indicators of bullying involvement. Overall, our results appear to indicate that the relative risk of both low life satisfaction and high psychological symptoms associated with bullying involvement actually increase as the number of supportive adults increases. In our study, we found that both in-person and cyberbullying perpetration and victimization remain prevalent problems globally that negatively affect all youth involved. Our findings highlight that any form of bullying involvement is detrimental to youth's mental well-being across cultural boundaries. And in general, we've observed a substantial decrease in the proportion of youth experiencing mental health concerns as the number of supportive adults increase from none to having both a supportive parent and teacher. This suggests that, in general, having a caring, supportive adult in developmentally salient contexts, like the home and school, is important in promoting positive mental health among youth. But even though having supportive adults in one's life was associated with better mental health outcomes in general, we found that mental health risks specifically associated with bullying involvement increased as the number of supportive adults increased. This pattern followed a dose-response relationship in the opposite direction than what we originally hypothesized. Mental health risks associated with bullying involvement increased as the number of supportive adults increased. And what this suggests is that having supportive adults may actually exacerbate the negative mental health risks associated with both in-person and online bullying involvement. One possible explanation for our findings is that perhaps adolescents perceive adults in their lives to be unhelpful and ineffective in addressing both in-person and cyberbullying. So despite reporting that they have supportive adults in their lives, it's possible that youth may perceive that adults are actually unhelpful and ineffective in addressing the situation effectively. And as a consequence, they may actually experience more distress in the presence of more supportive but ineffective adults. So youth's distress may actually be exacerbated if there are multiple adults unsuccessfully trying to intervene, or if multiple adults provide unhelpful emotional support. Another possibility is that while youth report having supportive teachers and parents in their lives, that they don't actually seek help from them about the bullying interaction. So despite having supportive adults in their lives, they may not receive any help because the bullying remains secretive or only known among the peer group. So perhaps youth with more supportive adults who remain unaware to the bullying experience actually may experience more distress because of increased feelings of helplessness and hopelessness in resolving the bullying dynamics. And lastly, our findings sort of suggest that merely having supportive adults in one's life is not sufficient in protecting youth from experiencing the harms of bullying involvement. For example, even though supportive teachers and parents are more likely to intervene when they become aware of bullying, the manner in which they intervene and how they support the youth may be more relevant in mitigating the distress related to bullying involvement. So just having relationships with them is not enough and do not necessarily protect youth from bullying-related distress, but the presence of more supportive adults may actually increase distress if bullying is not effectively resolved and if adults do not provide emotional support for those who experience the bullying. Our measure that we used in the study to assess adult support may not have been sensitive enough to assess how youth are supported specifically for issues related to bullying or cyberbullying. We did not assess whether adults were aware of the bullying dynamic or how and whether they've intervened in the past. So future studies should measure how youth receive support from adults related to bullying from a multidimensional framework that accounts for different types of support that youth can receive. Furthermore, there is a need to examine how adults moderate the relationship between bullying involvement and mental health indicators longitudinally. So longitudinal research is needed to untangle those relationships between bullying severity, adult support, and mental health problems. Future research can also clarify how supportive adults may prevent youth experiencing mental health difficulties from negative peer interactions that further perpetuate harm onto their mental well-being. Thank you very much for listening to my talk at the World Anti-Bullying Forum.
A very good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us in the World Anti-Bullying Forum today. My name is Paloma Viejo, and my colleague is Caterina Sarigotti. Today we are going to be presenting our findings of the research we conducted to measure teachers' ability to notice bullying in new school settings. So I think that it is well known that by now the COVID-19 pandemic has had tremendous effects on schools. And it has disrupted the life of students for almost a year and a half, 2 years, parents and teachers alike. It is undeniable that teachers have made a gigantic effort to continue delivering their classes and duties. And it should be acknowledged that they also, teaching in the new settings, did involve teachers acquiring certain level of digital literacy in a rather short period of time. Now, having said that, online teaching presented its own particular challenges. According to our research, some teachers found difficulties to connect with the students or even to organize working groups. To connect with the students was a matter of particular concern, particularly when we think and when we talk about the role of teachers to notice and intervene bullying or any form of bullying that happens in the classroom. So in considering this, our research interrogates how the new classroom settings have affected the ability of teachers to notice and intervene in bullying situations. And we understand by new school settings, online settings in a specific, regardless of the platforms teachers were using. This research took place, we have to open the frame. Originally, it started previous to the pandemic in February 2020, and it concluded in April, May 2021. Before the pandemic happened in the National Anti-Bullying Research and Research Center, we were creating the FUSE project, which is an intervention and prevention program to tackle bullying in schools here in Ireland. And we faced the possibility of having, originally it was designed to be taught by teachers offline, but then we had to adapt it to online settings as well. Now, what is in particular FUSE program? FUSE program has been designed to provide children with the resources to feel confident in noticing and reporting bullying and cover 5 aspects that can be taught sequentially or independently. The inspiration or the rationale behind this program is inspired on the work conducted by Delaney and Litane about diffusion of responsibility and emergency intervention. Obviously has been softened and adapted to school settings and the issue of bullying. So first workshop or module, we call it noticing, and as the name indicates, we show the signs and behaviors of bullying, the different types of bullying, verbal, socio-relational, non-verbal, the fundamentals of what is bullying. The second workshop aims to change the perception of bullying as normal behavior. We show the effects that bullying have for both the perpetrator and the target, but also for the bystanders. So basically, it encourages all FUSE participants to do not ignore the signs of bullying. So you have noticed bullying, it is important to recognize that those signs means bullying, and you should not ignore them or cover them up as normal behavior. Sequentially, the third workshop focus on the personal aspect of the child when noticing bullying. We don't want to impose any behavior. So basically, we look into the self-empathy, self-reflection, personal involvement and responsibility of the student in bullying incidents or situations. It follows by knowing what to do. Research outside the bullying field shows that knowing what to do favors intervention and efficiency of intervention. So in this workshop, we display an array of techniques to tackle bullying and how to intervene safely, basically. And the last of the modules is the intervention itself. Now, we don't provide any intervention method. What we do is to run an activity-based workshop that encourage children to come up with their own intervention mechanism. So this program was created for students, but it occurred that by the time of the pandemic happened, teachers were being trained to teach this in their classrooms. So we thought, all right, teachers have acquired 5-step knowledge. They are trained on what bullying is and how to intervene. And considering the original concern we had about are teachers going to notice bullying in new online settings, we decided to run this research that the co-author of this paper, Ekaterini Sarigoti, is going to explain in detail. Thank you.
When we were developing the program, we didn't want actually to impose a specific behavior for students and teachers, but instead we wanted to increase their capacity to deal with bullying and cyberbullying. And so we focused on educating and enhancing their self-efficacy in tackling bullying. Therefore, the present study aims also at measuring self-efficacy, which can be defined as someone's confidence in their ability to control their own motivation, behavior, and social environment. The data of the present study were collected between April and May 2021. The teachers were invited to complete an anonymous online survey. Since teachers were overwhelmed with working from home and working online, we decided to offer an incentive in order to maximize their participation. Therefore, we offered a voucher to any teacher who implemented the program and completed the surveys. 105 primary and post-primary teachers decided and completed the surveys. And out of those 105 teachers, almost 60% delivered their curriculum on school grounds when schools reopened after the lockdown, and almost 37% of teachers delivered the curricula online. Our analysis relies on an instrument that was initially developed for students in order to measure their self-efficacy in tackling bullying, and was based on the bystander intervention model that was discussed previously. We adapted the instruments to measure the teacher's ability to notice bullying and to intervene in school settings. 5 items were used to measure noticing, and 5 items were used to measure intervention. And we used a 6-point scale in order to get the teacher's responses. Also, we added another separate question, a self-report question regarding where teachers delivered the program, if it was online or offline, which provided us also with a distinction of what constitutes school settings. In order to extract the optimal number of components that indicate noticing and intervention, we ran a principal component analysis, 5 items loaded on noticing and 5 on intervention, and both components had a high reliability index. We also ran a multiple regression in order to test how noticing bullying and cyberbullying, as well as the delivery settings, could make a difference in intervening in these incidents. And the results indicated that teachers' increased confidence to notice bullying could also lead to increased confidence in intervening in these incidents. However, there was no difference between online and offline delivery in both noticing and intervening in bullying. The current study has also some limitations. One of them is that the sample size is small, and therefore we cannot have representative data of the whole population. Further research is therefore suggested with larger sample size in order to generalize the data. However, further research may be limited in exploring teacher self-efficacy in offline settings, as data collection regarding online classroom settings may not be feasible in case we don't have another lockdown.
So just to summarize some of the conclusions that Ekaterina has bringing up. So teachers did not feel that the confidence to notice bullying online differs from offline. Research shows that noticing bullying prompts intervention, which is important. And we also acknowledge that despite the limitation of this research, a similar type of research can be used. Or if there is an example of we shouldn't be worried about bullying intervention and noticing when when classes occur online, say on rural settings, or say on areas where there is no access of teachers, so some of the classes should be run online. The possibility of noticing and intervening on bullying, according to this type of research, despite its limitations, is proving positive. So we would like to thank you very much for your attention. And any questions we will be happy to answer. Thank you very much.